This is the last Castlelearning midterm review. This one is number 4. First of all, we have to simplify an expression that has an I in the denominator, so we're going to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate of the denominator, which is 1 plus 2i. So this becomes 4i on the top times 1 plus 2i. And on the bottom, you just first and last. 1 times 1 is 1. Negative 2i times positive 2i is negative 4i squared. I squared is negative 1. Negative 4 times negative 1 is a plus 4. So this becomes 1 plus 4, which is equal to 5. And on the top, distribute the I, and you get 4i plus 4i times 2i is 8i squared. Well, since I squared equals negative 1, this becomes negative 8 plus 4i. This is a negative 8 and then plus 4i all over 5. So the answer is option 2. Number 2, you have something that looks kind of like x squared minus 6x plus 8. But instead of an x squared and a regular 6, you've got a fourth and the second. But this is factorable because there are factors of 8 that add up to negative 6. They are negative 4 and negative 2. So instead of putting x minus 4 and x minus 2, I put x squared minus 4 and x squared minus 2. Well, this one's factorable, x plus 2 times x minus 2. But this one's not factorable, because 2 is not a perfect square. So if I wanted to solve this, you're going to say x equals negative 2, x equals positive 2, and you're going to set x squared minus 2 equal to 0. So when you add 2 to both sides, you get x squared equals 2, and then when you take the square root, you get x equals plus or minus the square root of 2. So you have negative 2 and positive 2, negative and positive square root of 2, and it looks like it's option 2 is the answer. Now, sum means add. So we're going to add these two complex numbers. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 3. 2i minus 6i is negative 4i. So this is just like graphing the point. Negative 3, negative 4. And if I were to graph negative 3, negative 4, I'd go left 3 and down 4. So it would be a point down here in quadrant 3. Number 4, you have a square root. 125 is 25 times 5. X to the 5th can be broken down into x to the 4th times x. Y to the 2nd stays y to the 2nd, and z to the 4th stays z to the 4th because those exponents are even. So when you take the square root of all of these perfect squares, you're going to pull a 5 out front. The x stays in x. The square root of x to the 4th is x to the 2nd. This is multiplied. This x will stay underneath. The square root of y squared is y, and the square root of z to the 4th is z squared. And what stays underneath is the 5 and the x. And now you're going to multiply x squared times x, and that becomes x to the 3rd. So what we get is 5, x to the 3rd times y times z squared, and underneath stayed a 5 and an x. See which one this matches with. Looks like it matches with option 4. Number 5, we have a lot of factoring to do, and this last fraction is a divided by, so you're going to flip this one upside down. So this x minus 4 comes to the bottom, and this x squared minus 8x plus 16 is factorable into x minus 4 times x minus 4, and he comes to the top. Over here we have an x times 5 minus x on the top, and down on the bottom we have an x minus 4 times x plus 3. And here we have an x plus 3 times x minus 3, and on the bottom we have an x times x minus 5. Now we have to cancel a whole bunch of common factors. Well, way over here on the right-hand side, we have an x minus 4 and an x minus 4. Here we have an x minus 4 on the top and an x minus 4 on the bottom. We have an x plus 3 on the bottom and an x plus 3 on the top. We have an x and an x. And a 5 minus x and an x minus 5 cancels down to -1. So it looks like everything on the bottom canceled out, and we're left with on the top a -1 times x minus 3. And when you distribute that -1, you get -x plus 3. And this can be also rewritten as 3 minus x. The 3 is positive and the x is negative. They wanted you to write it like that so it would match up with number 2. Discriminant. If the discriminant is real, it's got to be positive. If the roots are unequal, it cannot be equal to 0. And if it's irrational, it's not a perfect square. So we have to find the positive non-zero number that's not a perfect square. It looks like it's 7. Number 7, if they're real, rational, and equal, it means the discriminant must be equal to 0. Equal roots have a 0 discriminant. Number 8, the inverse is switching the x and y. So instead of y equals 3x plus 2, you're going to have x equals 3y plus 2. And usually you just subtract 2 and divide by 3. And I think that's what they did here. So you're going to say x minus 2 equals 3y. And now you're going to divide both sides by 3. And this is written differently than that. So we're going to divide each one of these. We're going to do this kidney bean thing or the heart thing that I talk about. So this is x over 3 minus 2 over 3. And x over 3 is the same thing as 1/3 x. So the answer is option 3, 1/3 x minus 2 over 3. Number 9, this is a fractional equation. So the first thing we have to find is the LCD. And that is x times x minus 2. Then we're going to put that LCD next to each part of this equation. X times x minus 2 goes here, x times x minus 2 goes here, and x times x minus 2 goes here. All 3 places. And the reason to do that is to cancel out the x top and bottom, and you're left with 9x minus 18. Over here, the x minus 2's cancel out, so you're left with 9 times x. And here you have 12x times x is 12x squared. 12x times -2 is minus 24x. So we have a quadratic equation. We're going to set it equal to 0, but let's add 9x plus 9x first. 9x plus 9x is 18x. Minus 18 equals 12x squared minus 24x. I'm kind of running out of room, so let me get this over here. Well, I'm going to have to subtract 18x from each side and add 18. So we have 12x squared, negative 24 minus 18 is equal to negative 42x. And then you're going to add 18 to both sides, plus 18 equals 0. Well, what do we have? We have something that's divisible by 6. Everything here is divisible by 6, so I'm going to pull this down here so I can have some more room. If you divide this by 6, you have 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 equals 0. I'm just dividing everything by 6, both sides of the equation. Everything, every single term. So here is the result after division by 6. So this is factor in, factor out. There are factors of 6 that add up to -7, -6, and -1. 2x minus 6 times 2x minus 1, all divided by 2. And so now we're going to factor this into x minus 3 times 2x minus 1, that's equal to 0, and we're going to solve this for x. Well, this x equals 3, and this x equals 1/2. So you have 2 values of x. X equals 3, x equals 1/2. In ascending order, that means from lowest to highest, but it doesn't really matter. Number 10, when you have a large exponent on I, you divide by 4 and get the remainder. So 27 divided by 4. 4 goes into 27 6 times, 6 times. 6 times 4 is 24, with the remainder of 3. You don't care about the 6. I to the 27th is equal to I to the 3rd. Now you're going to divide 34 by 4. And 4 goes into 34, 8 times, with the remainder of 2. So I to the 34th is the same thing as I to the 2 because that's the remainder. I to the 3rd is equal to negative I, and I squared is equal to negative 1. So you have negative I minus 1 is the answer, option 3. Number 11. This has a negative underneath the radical, so it's going to come out and become an I. This has a negative under the radical, and it's going to come out and become an I. 48 is 16 times 3. The square root of 25 is 5. And the square root of 27, you're going to add 27 breaks up into 9 times 3. So this 16 comes out and becomes a 4i square root of 3. 3.5 plus 5 equals 8.5. Those are like terms. And 9 comes out and becomes 3i square root of 3. So now you have these two like terms. 4i square root of 3 plus 3i square root of 3 is 7i square root of 3. And then you have an 8.5 added on to that. So it looks like it is option 2, number 11. Number 12. Oh, let's skip number 12. You don't have to know that for the midterm. Sorry about that. And number 13. Don't have to know that for the midterm either. Number 14. The sum of the roots is equal to 3/4 in which one? Let's see, the sum is equal to negative b over a. So in this one, the sum is 8 over 4, which is equal to 2. Well, I'm not looking for a 2, I'm looking for a 3/4. On this one, the sum of the roots is negative 8 over 4, which is equal to negative 2. This one is positive 2, this is negative 2. Oh, let's go down to number 3. The sum is equal to negative b over a is 3 over 4. Well, that looks like it's going to work. And the product of the roots is c over a. Negative 8 over 4 is equal to negative 2, and that's what I'm looking for. So the answer is option 3. Remember, sum is negative b over a, product is c over a. And then number 15, oh, we have another, it's a sort of a quadratic equation that's going to be factored, but we're going to add 25 to both sides first. X to the 4th minus 26x squared plus 25 equals 0. The factors of 25 that add up to negative 26 are negative 25, negative 1. So when you factor it, it's going to be x squared minus 25 times x squared minus 1. And then this is x minus 5 times x plus 5. Difference of two perfect squares, and so is this, x minus 1 times x plus 1. So the four answers are plus and minus 5, plus and minus 1. The answer is option 3. And that's it. And I hope these videos have been helpful for you as you review for the midterm exam. Have a great weekend. See you Monday morning, 8 o'clock, period 4, room 604, period 7, room 600.